I'm about 40 searches in on Google, yet I found nothing that can help, nor anyone who's been in a similar situation to this one. Some examples of my searches are: how to stop door from spinning, stop door glitching in house, prevent door from leading anywhere except the room behind, how do I flip my door back from inside out, and then all the above with Reddit suffixed. Other than nobody seeming to have a clue, the other glaring issue is that I can't find any consistent way to describe, well, whatever the heck my kitchen door is doing at any given time. The first time it behaved in an undoor-like manner was last Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from the store and was hauling inside a few grocery bags on the brink of splitting open. I kicked the front door closed behind me and turned right to head into the kitchen. The door was closed, so I had to stoop awkwardly and twist it in the crook of my arm. With a gentle shove, the door opened slightly. When I went to push it further, my elbow clipped something, and I tumbled in a tangle of limbs and groceries. Now, my sight is near perfect, and I have no issues with depth perception. Yet, when I looked around, I saw nothing I could have caught my arm on. I groaned into one palm and rested the other on the door, feeling the cool wood grain beneath my fingers. But when I looked up, I saw my fingers splayed across thin air. My hand was resting on nothing, and yet some invisible force stood in its way that felt like my kitchen door. I pushed forward an instinct, and the door, the real door, moved in tandem. Somehow, some way, the physical presence of the door was around 30 degrees behind where I saw it. Now paradoxically familiar with the impossible situation, I give it a firmer push. There was no impact when I saw the door hit the wall, and the bang that sounded half a second later startled me. I expected the door to bounce back, but it stuck to the wall as if coated in superglue. Upon closer inspection, I saw that the door was in the wall. Well, it wasn't really in the wall as much as it was on the wall. About 2 inches of the door's outer edge lay flat on the wall without any depth. It was like that part of the door transformed into a partially painted mural that connected seamlessly with my real kitchen door. It stayed like that, stuck, for the rest of the day. Wouldn't budge an inch. It wasn't something I could just shake off either. It was noon, so I wasn't tired, and the midday sun ensured no tricks of the light were at play. Bizarre as it was, my thoughts were elsewhere. It was Friday, and I planned to see my daughter Lila on the weekend, hopefully with little interaction with my ex-wife Sadie. I couldn't forget about it, but shoved it aside nonetheless for more important thoughts. When I trudged into the kitchen on Saturday morning, the door was normal. While the kettle boiled, I leant on the counter with my hands pressed onto the sides of my face. I imagined making a goofy expression, one that would make Lila burst out laughing, and smiled at the thought. I poured a coffee, grabbed a banana from the fruit bowl, and turned to head over to the living room. I'd heard nothing to indicate the kitchen door had closed, but there it sat, with its door white panels. I didn't remember closing it on the way in. Bear in mind, I'd only just got my coffee, yet to take a sip. The way the knob turned in my hand, however, couldn't be rationalised as morning brain. The wood grain spiralled around the handle in a psychedelic whirlpool, pulling the door's surface into a twisting point behind the doorknob. Lovecraft was right in thinking that witnessing the unwitnessable cleaves at the fortitude of the mind. I mean, I'm not a rational fanatic, as his protagonists tended to be, but the way that door warped and twisted in on itself over and over again would make anyone question their own fundamental beliefs. Inside turned outside, then became outside, and then neither, all at once. I was awestruck and terrified in equal measure. I knew a door couldn't have ill will, nor pose any considerable threat, but when faced with such a violation of the unexpected, the brain kind of short-circuits, Some atrophied reflex in my body kicked my leg out in front of me and, shocked at the involuntary motion, I squeezed my eyelids shut. The sole of my slipper met resistance, which lessened, then disappeared entirely. When I opened my eyes, the door was back to normal, swung open into the hallway beyond. Other than being inverted, it was back to being a plain old door. Not entirely normal, but I could live with it, if it meant no more of that morphing impossibility. Any thoughts or theories regarding my kitchen door were stored for later in the recesses of my mind. As I pulled out of the driveway to go and pick up Lila, Sadie waited with her on the porch, and I could see her impatience from a mile away. Arms crossed, dressing gown tied tightly around her waist. My brakes squealed before setting in park at the end of the driveway, at which point Sadie gave Lila a gentle nudge, setting her into a sprint towards my car. That grin she always had plastered on her face made everything else fall away, if only briefly. Lila's smile faltered after running straight into the car door, failing to predict when to slow down. I almost exploded in laughter, but my face fell back a step, seeing Sadie over Lila's shoulder, lips pursed and eyebrows raised in an unamused expression. I popped the passenger side lock and Lila hopped inside with unbridled enthusiasm. "Dad, Mummy wouldn't let me have hot chocolate." "Is that so?" I asked, leaning over to look past her and back to the porch. "I still want one. Can I have one at your house? Please, Dad." "Well, behave yourself and we'll wait and see." She only just made it the 15 minutes home without messing about too much. I was going to make her a hot chocolate regardless, but it's easier to drive without your 8-year-old getting rowdy. The second I switched the car off, Lila was out of her seat like lightning. Seriously, before I even had time to pull the key out of the ignition, she looked back at me from the front door with an urgency above all, so I got out of the car and headed down the paved slabs to my house. The door unlocked with a click. Lila burst through and into the house, curving around and barreling into the kitchen. I paused with one foot through the doorway and patted my pockets. "Hey, baby, I'm just going to grab my phone from the car. Don't break anything, eh?" No response. I called out again, louder this time, and was met with nothing but silence. I hadn't been that concerned about the kitchen door, but the knowledge of what I'd seen it do, combined with Lila's refusal, or inability, to reply, filled me with a riveting dread. I whirled around and stepped through the front door, peering around it towards the kitchen. The closed door to the kitchen looked normal. Wait. I didn't hear it close. Lila definitely ran into the kitchen, and she obviously couldn't have done so without the door being open. I leapt towards the shining doorknob, grasping and twisting it while pushing at the same time. The door flew open. But what I saw was not my kitchen. Behind was a cupboard-sized space, with another door on the wall, shut like the one I'd just opened. "Lila?" Nothing. "Lila!" This time I swore I heard the faintest echo of a voice, with a pitch matching my daughter's. I plunged into paternal panic mode and opened the second door. What was behind it? Another door. Beads of sweat started to form on my face as I opened door after door after door. Every time there was another knob to turn. In my state of terrified frustration, I'd failed to look behind me after passing through the first door, and when this thought rose to the surface of my mind, like a bloated and waterlogged corpse, I twisted my head over my shoulder to see a plain, deep blue wall matching the rest of the claustrophobic space. With no other choice, I pressed onward, flinging open every door in my way. The changes were so gradual as to be imperceptible. However, after about 50 open doors, I saw it. A deep, perfectly straight scratch mark in the door. At the time, it didn't really mean anything, but the further I went on, the more of these engravings appeared. First, they formed a pentagon, and then from each corner of the pentagon formed unfamiliar runic shapes. I don't have the slightest inkling as to what it means, or what language it's composed in, if it is indeed a language at all. All I know is that this symbol, this sigil, formed a connection from my kitchen door to somewhere else. Somewhere outside. I threw my hands out to the wall when behind what I found out was the penultimate door stood Lila. She faced away from me, but through the final door which stood wide open, hanging on its hinges, above a cosmic precipice, vast silver beams reached down from the heavens, piercing an endless ocean of dark fog, at depths far too great to ever comprehend. And above that ocean sat a ball of light so bright and dense, it warped the fabric of space around it, beaming with colours foreign to the reality I knew. Streams of the dark fog spouted up in arcs, pulled and siphoned into the blinding glare of a million stars. Lila's small frame shivered against my own trembling body. As much as I wanted to whisk her up into my arms and run, my brain refused to make any rational decisions when faced with this unearthly place. I might have toppled straight into the expanse from all alone if it weren't for a harsh cracking noise sounding in close proximity. I clasped my hands on Lila's shoulders instinctively, drawing her back from the edge, and my rising gaze met with something that returned 100 more. A being that looked like it was made of polished slate stood on a chaotic lattice of dark ice, frozen in nebulous wisps, indicating it was the same dark fog as beneath. The creature had a head resembling a pinecone, each glistening plate unfolded to reveal far too many eyes to be of use for any living thing. So fixated was I on its spiteful glare, I hadn't noticed the dozens of plates peeling back on its body to unveil winding fleshy limbs, ending in 3 digits. In one, it held a whittled shard of block ice, quivering in a way that betrayed trembling excitement. It dropped the shard and let out a piercing wail, so harsh it was as if a shotgun had just been fired right beside me. At its call, my attention was drawn to the shifting bodies behind it. All around, creatures I'd rather not recall converged in a mass exodus toward the doorway where we stood. Hastily as they begun, they stopped and looked up. The gargantuan metal beams groaned, and slowly began to move. The beams had a bizarre, almost ornamental design to them, and as they moved and undulated among webs of block ice, I saw what they really were. Feathers. Gleaming silver feathers fluttering in an absent breeze, and as they spread and lowered, their owner came into view. Concentric rings of light and shadow, shrinking towards a singularity where the feathers converged, that was both bright like the stars, yet black like the void encompassing their very firmament. As it descended, the swarm of creatures rose in frenetic babbling, screeches and hisses, and sounds I can't even begin to describe. Speech or simple bestial vocalizations? I don't know. These things, they were terrified by whatever was descending from above, and it was this revelation that charged my body with adrenaline. I stepped in front of Lila and grabbed the doorknob, but the exposed muscle fingers on the pinecone head wrapped around the floor. For the first time, I heard words I could understand, in a voice that sounded like wind howling down a chimney.
Do not close that door. We have all been imprisoned here, beyond what is, for far too long.
Let go! I screamed, tugging hysterically at the doorknob.
You have seen Olokakanai, and it has seen you. You are both his prisoner now. But if you open this door, if you let us come with you...
The creature was cut off as a vast chromic feather whipped down from above, lodging its sharp spines into the creature's head and violently yanking it up into the heavens. I slammed the door shut with all my might, and when I turned around, we were inexplicably in my downstairs hallway. Lila was sitting on the floor, bawling her eyes out. I'd have joined her, but the shock of it forbade any such emotional response. I sat down and pulled her close, shushing her with reassurances. She buried her face in my chest, and her muffled sobs sent waves of pain through my heart. Daring a glance up at the door, I saw that the sigil remained, carved into the wood with straggling flakes of white paint hanging onto its edges. I tried to cheer up Lila, but after the initial shock wore off, it was replaced by a catatonic dread, so very few words were exchanged. Sadie was vitriolic when we arrived on Sunday evening, seeing the state Lila was in, and escorted her out to the car. I tried to explain. Lila did too, but she wasn't having it, leaving me with only an icy glare and an empty house. I haven't set foot in the kitchen since. Call me a coward, I don't care. The shrieking clashes from behind the door, speaking of feathers that reach to eternity. I'd rather swing by the closest burger joint or eat straight out of the grocery bag every day than ever touch that doorknob. I swear I'm not a bad person, though it might be an idea to call someone up for a door replacement. Some local handyman. I just hope that they don't find it too weird when I watch them through the window, waiting in morbid trepidation for the moment they try the door and see what's on the other side. I hope to just see my plain old kitchen, but if not, maybe Olakakanai is bad with faces.